This happened about 3 years ago. I'm 23 now, but back then, I was a 20-year-old college kid just trying to make it through without a mountain of debt. That's how I ended up with the job. It was a third-shift inventory gig at this brand new, absolutely massive distribution warehouse on the edge of town. The pay was good, and the work was easy. But the one requirement they conveniently left out of the job description: you had to be okay with being completely, utterly alone. This place was a monster. I mean, you could fit 3 football fields inside it, with shelves soaring 50 feet into the air, packed with everything from TVs to garden gnomes. During the day, it was a hive of activity. But at night, from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., it was just me. The constant hum of the fluorescent lights and the endless beep of my inventory scanner. For the first few weeks, the biggest scare I got was when a motion-activated light flickered on a second too late. I used to think the silence was the creepiest part of the job. I was so wrong. The creepiest part is when the silence gets broken. My shift that night started like any other. My manager, Dave, this tired-looking guy in his 40s, handed me my aisle list, reminded me to lock the main office door behind him, and was gone by 11:15. The silence settled in, and I got to work. My job was just scanning specific sections to confirm inventory counts. It was mind-numbing, but I'd pop in my headphones, put on a podcast, and the hours would just melt away. Around 2 a.m., I was deep in Section G housewares. Imagine aisles and aisles of stacked boxes of blenders, toasters, and coffee makers. I was up on one of those rolling ladders, scanning a box on a really high shelf, when I saw it. Tucked behind a stack of microwaves, almost completely hidden, was an apple. It wasn't old or rotten. It was a fresh, green apple, and it had exactly 1 bite taken out of it. I just stared at it for a second. My first thought was, okay, one of the day shift guys must have left it, but that didn't make any sense. This shelf was 40 feet up, in a section that wasn't even scheduled for stocking. You had to go way out of your way to get up here. And seriously, who leaves a half-eaten apple behind a microwave box? I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just weird, and got back to work. But for the first time, the sheer size of the building felt less empty and more watchful. An hour later, I was in the last aisle of my section. It's the one that backs right up against the huge windowless concrete wall of the building. This was always the quietest part of the warehouse. All I could ever hear was the echo of my own footsteps. That's when I heard it. It was faint but unmistakable. A sound like a can or a small tool being knocked over, coming from somewhere deep in the aisles, way on the other side of the warehouse. I froze, ripping my headphones out. I stood there for what felt like a full minute, just listening. Nothing. Just the hum of the lights again. My heart started to pick up its pace. I told myself it was just the building settling, or maybe a box had finally shifted on a shelf. It's a huge place. Things probably fall all the time. But I knew I was lying to myself. The sound was too distinct. It was the sound of activity. I tried to ignore it, but my focus was completely shot. Every little creak of a shelf, every distant hum from a ventilation unit, now sounded like footsteps. The aisles, which usually just felt long, now felt like dark, endless tunnels. I decided to take my 15-minute break early, just to get to the brightly lit break room and reset my head. The break room was right at the front of the building, next to the main office. It was the only spot that felt remotely normal. I'd packed a sandwich and a soda, and I'd left it in the fridge when my shift started. I opened the fridge, grabbed my lunch bag, and sat down at the table. I unwrapped my sandwich, and I stopped dead. There was a perfect semicircular bite taken right out of the corner. It wasn't my bite. I hadn't touched it. I live alone. No one else could have. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a misplaced apple. This wasn't some random noise. This was proof. Someone else was in this building with me. right now. They had been in this very room, opened the fridge, opened my lunch bag, taken a bite of my food, and then put it all back for me to find. It felt like a message, a total violation. My mind started racing. Who was it? A homeless person looking for shelter? A fired employee with a key? The why didn't matter nearly as much as the what now. I was locked inside this gigantic building with a stranger who was bold enough to eat my food and then just disappear into the shadows. I quietly stood up, leaving the sandwich on the table. My hands were shaking. The entire warehouse suddenly felt like a trap. Every single shadow between those towering shelves could be hiding someone. I backed out of the break room and went straight for the main office. The door was heavy steel. I had the key. I thought if I could just get inside and lock it, I could call the police. I fumbled with the key, my fingers feeling clumsy and numb. The lock finally clicked open. I slipped inside, slammed the heavy door shut, and threw the deadbolt. The sound echoed in the small office. I let out a breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding. I was safe, at least for a moment. I reached for the office phone on the desk to call 911, and that's when I saw him. Through the reinforced glass window of the office door, which looked out onto the main warehouse floor, a figure detached itself from the shadows of a nearby aisle. It was a man, tall, gaunt, wearing layers of dark, ragged clothing. His face was mostly hidden by shadows and a dirty beanie pulled down low, but I could feel his eyes lock right onto me. He hadn't been hiding. He had been waiting, watching me run to the office. He didn't rush. He just started walking slowly, deliberately, straight toward the office door. He wasn't frantic. He looked territorial, like I was the one who was trespassing. I scrambled for the phone, my fingers mashing 911. Just as the call connected, the man reached the door. He didn't knock. He just placed his hand on the handle and calmly, silently, tried to turn it. 911. What's your emergency? A calm voice said on the phone. I ducked below the window, my back pressed hard against the wall. I'm at the Amazonia Distribution Center on Route 9, I whispered, my voice cracking. There's someone in the building with me. He's outside the office door right now. The handle rattled again, harder this time. Then a heavy thud as he slammed his shoulder into the door. The dispatcher was asking me questions, but it was all a blur. I could hear him out there, not yelling, just making these low, guttural sounds of frustration. He started pulling at the door, his full weight groaning against the hinges. This wasn't someone who was scared of being caught. This was someone who was angry that I had locked him out. The minutes stretched into an eternity. I stayed on the line, crouched on the floor, just listening to this man trying to get through a solid steel door. I didn't move an inch until I heard the police banging on the loading bay doors, yelling, "Police!" I told the dispatcher they were here, and they guided me through letting them in. When I finally opened the office door, flanked by 2 officers, the main floor was empty. He was gone, vanished back into the maze he obviously called home. They cleared the entire building, aisle by aisle. It took them over an hour. They didn't find him, but they did find his nest, deep in the back of the warehouse, in a section of shelving for discontinued products that nobody ever checked. He had built a little home for himself. A dirty sleeping bag, piles of empty food cans, water bottles, and a bucket he was using as a toilet. He had been living there for months, maybe even longer. But that wasn't the part that made me quit my job the very next day. That wasn't the part that still gives me nightmares. Tucked into a corner of his nest was a small, worn cardboard box. Inside, the police found a collection of his trophies. A woman's silver locket, a set of car keys, and a student ID from a different college for a kid who had been reported missing 8 months earlier. The police think he was sneaking out at night, preying on people, and using the warehouse as his base of operations. They think he saw me as an intruder in his territory. I wasn't just some random worker he was trying to avoid. To him, I was a threat to his sanctuary. And looking back at his calm, steady walk toward that office door, I know with absolute certainty that if that lock hadn't held, I would have become the next item in his box.